Sylvester Stallone. Just about everyone can identify Sylvester Stallone nowadays either by his distinctive voice or iconic appearance. However, in the early 1970s, Stallone was living on the streets. He'd been evicted from his apartment and was forced to find work fast. In order to make ends meet, Stallone appeared in an off-Broadway stage play and several small film roles throughout the early 70s. He even appeared in a softcore film for which he was paid $200. However, it still wasn't enough. In desperate need of cash, Stallone sold his dog for $50, or so the story goes. Don't worry, he later bought him back. Following this heartbreaking decision, Stallone began writing. It took him nearly 4 days to complete, but at the end of it, he'd come up with the idea for Rocky, the story of a down-and-out boxer. It still wasn't easy, however. Stallone attempted to sell the script to several studios, but they all turned him down when he insisted on playing the lead himself. Eventually, Irwin Winkler and Robert Chardoff took an interest in the script, but weren't keen on Stallone as the lead. Stallone was unwilling to negotiate, and the three eventually came to an agreement. They certainly didn't expect the film to become so successful. Rocky was nominated for multiple awards, including Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay. Chris Gardner. Before he became a multi-millionaire, Chris Gardner had a hard life. In 1980, Gardner began an affair with a young dental student. She became pregnant, so he left his wife and moved in with her. At first, everything was fine, but he wanted more. It was then that he met a stockbroker while on a sales call. He decided to dedicate his life to the world of finance following a conversation with the man. He bought a Ferrari, quit his job, and began his training. That's when it all went downhill. Gardner showed up ready to work, only to find out that his hiring manager had been fired, leaving him without a job. To make matters worse, he owed nearly $1,200 in parking tickets, and things with his girlfriend were falling apart. She left with his son after Gardner spent 10 days in jail for the unpaid tickets. After finding a new job, he was able to get his son back, but the flop house he was living in did not allow children. Despite having a good job, he and his son were homeless. He hid it for over a year until he could get them a proper house. The movie The Pursuit of Happiness, starring Will Smith, is actually based on Gardner's life. Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio has risen through the Hollywood ranks from teenage heartthrob to well-respected film star. It hasn't always been that way, however. Many would think that growing up in Hollywood would be a dream, but for DiCaprio, it was more akin to a nightmare. He grew up in a rough neighborhood plagued with all kinds of illicit activity. Thankfully, in the early 90s, he was finally able to break into television as young Luke Brower, a homeless boy in the ABC sitcom Growing Pains. DiCaprio admitted that he felt for his character as he too had once been homeless. Things changed for him in 1992 when DiCaprio made his big screen debut. Robert De Niro had personally picked him out of 400 other young actors for a lead role in this boy's life. This helped pave the way for him to enter the industry. His rise to stardom saw him featured in several other roles before finally hitting it big in 1996's Romeo and Juliet. His new heartthrob image was what made James Cameron offer him the role of Jack Dawson in his 1997 film Titanic. DiCaprio initially refused, but Cameron encouraged him to pursue the role. It ended up changing his life. The film grossed more than $1.843 billion worldwide. DiCaprio's fan base erupted into what would later become known as Leo Mania, as he appeared on the cover of at least 4 teen magazines. Jim Carrey. Today, Jim Carrey is one of the best-known comedians in the industry. His roles as a pet detective and many others have tickled our funny bones and made us guffaw with laughter. However, things weren't always so bright and cheery for the funny man. Before he was a multi-millionaire, he was just a kid with a dream. Back when Carey was growing up in Ontario, Canada, his father lost his accounting job. Carrie was just a young teen at the time. Before long, the family lost their home and were forced to live in a Volkswagen camper van for 8 months while Carrie's father looked for a new job. By the time he was 16 years old, Carrie himself dropped out of school and began working full-time as a janitor. He later described these as some of his darkest years. His only outlet was his comedy. He began performing stand-up routines at small local clubs. At first, he struggled, but as time went on, he was able to polish his act. He went from open mic nights to paid shows as his reputation improved. By the early 1980s, Carrie was a rising star in comedy and even opened for comedian Rodney Dangerfield on tour in Las Vegas. By 1994, Carrie broke into the film industry. He was cast as the lead in Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. Ed Sheeran. English singer and songwriter Ed Sheeran is pretty well known now, but before he got his big break, he sang in a local church choir. He began recording music in 2004 and performed in small venues. However, between 2008 and 2010, he sometimes found himself without a bed to sleep in. At times, he had to sleep on the Central Line or outside of Buckingham Palace while playing gigs in and around London. Other times, he would stay with friends, moving from couch to couch. He even admitted that sometimes at the end of a show, he'd ask the audience if anyone had somewhere he could spend the night. Despite some of the struggles he went through during his early career, he decided to buy a ticket to Los Angeles in April 2010. He only had one gig lined up, but his mind decided to go anyway. After that one gig, he played open mic nights all over the city. He was performing one night when he was spotted by Jamie Foxx, who was impressed by Sheeran's skills. He offered to let Sheeran use his recording studio and stay in his Hollywood home for a while. Unbelievable! Do you know what's even more astounding though? That Rupert Murdoch has a net worth of $12.9 billion.